So essentially what we're going to do today is talk about SQL. It's an introduction to SQL. It's very, very basic. You get to know SQL. And we're going to talk about this a little bit and then practice a little bit with some SQL query. And we'll take it from there. Please do not hesitate to stop, ask questions, and work with me together. Don't be shy. I'm here to help. I'm here for you. This is my pleasure. So the more you engage with me, the easier it will be to help you guys understand more and learn more. There's no such thing as a silly question. Everything is okay. It's a truly beginner's class, so there shouldn't be any problem on my end. Okay, so allow me to share screen. This is a lecture I have called Data Demystified. It's a relatively comprehensive introduction to data world, and SQL is just one part of it. Which screen are you looking at? Let me confirm that. 1 second. Okay. Zoom, sharing screen again. Okay. Can you see my screen? Someone
yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Okay, so quick disclaimer, my name is Omid, CTO at Jutomate. It's an Israeli consulting company. I specialize in data on the technology level and the analytical level. You're more than welcome to open your videos so we can see each other and engage with each other. You should know that I really love what I do, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm the best at it. So you're more than welcome to challenge me, ask questions, email me. I even will put here my business work should you like to engage with me on a business level. A little bit about me. I spent the last 20 years in startups. I work for Jaja, Scream, and a company called Walla News. One second, please. Investing.com. Noise. Those who are not speaking, please mute themselves. Thank you. So, back to me. So as hobbies, I have a black belt in martial arts in Taekwondo, over 20 years of experience, 3rd-degree black belt. I have a skydiving hobby, and I like to lecture about data. I have this community called Big Data Demystified, which you are in. And I want to ask you a question. Let's assume I had all the data in the world. What would I do with it? What do you think? Please open your microphones and let's talk. Anyone? Okay. So I'll leave that to you guys to think about it as we talk, but there's lots of business use cases you can do with data. You can do customer journey. You can do personalization and enrichment of user profiles. You can do revenue per users, and you can create some conversion funnels to understand the user journey in your website, in your application. You can do some personalization where you approach customer with more personalized ads or content or products based on their preferences. And you can do some sort of financial analysis on revenue to understand if you're profitable or you can benefit from a scenario where you spend money to get money. Let's talk a little bit about data roles. There's a big data architect where his job is to connect the dots between all the different roles on the different data sources to create an architecture that makes sense. The data engineer is like a plumber. His role is to design a data pipeline that all the data flows through it. The data scientist is the one generating insights out of the data. And the BI developer is the one that creates dazzling visualization on top of the data. And the data analyst is the one working with the data, analyzing it and deriving trends and some sort of insights which are new to the system. There are many types of databases, but you can divide them into 3 categories: operational databases, which designed to serve your application, for example, MySQL. And there are analytical databases which are designed to create, to help you answer analytical questions. For example, how many users visited my website last year? And there's the third family called Hadoop Archive, which is essentially, think about the genome use case where you need to store the genome, the DNA sequence of the entire human race. You need a very specialized database for this. We're going to skip this one and go directly to SQL. Regardless of which database you're going to use, there's always going to be a query language, a standard query language, in short, SQL, that will help you to query the data. For example, you have 3 types of queries. You have simple queries, which we are going to cover in a bit, aggregation queries, and joins. The simple query, this is the structure. You select columns, for example, student name, course name, grade, from a table. A database where in a table called grades table. And then you filter all the grades which are bigger than 60, and the course name is introduction to data. Aggregation queries is, for example, for a scenario where you want to ask the average of a specific class. For example, course name, introduction to data. You want to add the average grade of the entire class. So you select course, average on grade, from grades table, where course name is introduction to data, and you group the results into one line. The third family is, for example, join between 2 types of tables. For example, the grades table and my LinkedIn contacts. So it's a table that I took the data from LinkedIn and put it there, and I want to join them based on the student name and the contact name. If it was a bit too fast for you, we're going to cover this in a nutshell on a small demo. For this class, I have created a sample synthetic data set. I put it in a database called BigQuery on Google Cloud. This is the table. You can see the structure of the table. This is the schema. You have a date, a session ID, a user ID, a game ID, and a score. Essentially, this table holds scores data for different games. Meaning what? I have, let's say, without the limit for a second. I have 3,150 rows. I have 5 columns. And this is my entire table. It's like an Excel file. Believe it or not, it's even represented as an Excel file. Allow me to export the data to a Google spreadsheet so you have a sense of what is the data. Same thing, 5 columns, date, session ID, user ID, game ID. And lots of rows, 13,000 rows. So most of you, I know, I assume by now know how to work with Excel, but the idea now is to use SQL to ask questions on the data. But before we ask some questions, we need to understand the data a little bit. If anyone has questions, please, now is the time to stop and ask questions.
Could you
Anyone?
please show? Yes, I have a question, if I may. Could you please show again, how did you take a SQL file to Excel in your Google Drive?
Save results, Google Sheets. That's it. As simple as that.
Thanks. Okay.
You're most welcome. So this is the basic simple query. If you remember, the structure is select, rows, from implies give me a table list. So this is the table name, fact, row data, which is stored in a database called modeling, which is stored in a project called SQL Demystified, a specific project I created for this course, for this session. So what do we have in the data? We have about 5 years worth of data on users, which are represented with IDs and numerical representation. To preserve the privacy, I did not put their first name and last name, just the user ID. So you won't be able to match it to a real user, but you should be able to ask user business questions about this user. The same goes for the session ID. It's just a number that represents a running number that represents a specific date, time, where the user 707 played a specific game with the ID 4 and got as a score 0. So let's think together. If anyone wants to engage, what cues you, what makes you, what do you want to ask about this table? Generally speaking, without code, what would you like to know about the users, about the games? What interests you?
You could ask for a specific time period. You could ask maybe for a specific game ID or score and then group them.
Yes. So let's start with some basic functions, okay? Let's start by selecting date and game ID. I don't have to select all those. I can just simply select the column I want and then get all those. I can even filter them. Instead of getting the entire data, I can do where date equals, for example, this date. And I now know that on January 1st, 2014, only game ID 4 was played. Okay. How about if I do count of game IDs? What do you expect the answer would be?
4.
Why 4?
Because the game ID is there in the number 4 is in the game ID column.
Yes. So don't be confused with sum, which is something totally different. Let's run them both. Let's call this as count game ID, and this as sum game ID. Let's do enter so it will be clearer. Let's make it a little bit more readable. Now we're expecting 3 columns: date, let's group by here, date, so we'll have 1 line, and what we will get is 2 different things. So we had the original game ID. Let's add it here. Ignore the group by for now. What essentially we did is we got the original game ID, which is 4, and then we counted the amount of game IDs, which is 1, because it's only 1 row. And then we did the sum of the IDs, meaning all this plus the rest of the rows. Since there are no rows, so the answer would be 4. Let's try to remove the filter. Let's run it on the entire data set. What do you expect would happen? Okay, let's run it. So we got the same amount of rows because I can tell you that each date has only 1 row, and the result is what you expect, is quite similar to the data. So the game ID is the same. The count would always be 1 because I already told you we expect just 1 game ID per day because this is how I construct data. And the sum would be 4. Let's try.
I'm sorry, can you, so what the query goes kind of like, let's say you are in a test situation and then they give you a question. So with the query that you have here, there's a question that we actually answered. I'm trying to articulate that question. Can you help me with that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let's start with something more basic. Perhaps it was a bit too complicated. Let's start with, let's count the amount of rows we have in a table. This is how you would do it. You would run the count function and enter the entire data set into it. What do you expect the answer would be?
13, tralala, yes.
Yep, right you are. So I get only 1 row as a result with the count of the amount of rows. What do you expect would happen if I sum the game ID?
The answer would be I get amount of games that are played, but not 1300, because they could be doubles.
Let's do both count and sum.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not be confused between the two. This would be
Good idea, yeah.
sum as sum game ID. And this would be count game ID. Anyone would like to guess? Let's run it. So here's what happened. The amount of game IDs is the same amount of rows, because each column has 13,150 rows. So when you count a specific column, you essentially are counting the amount of rows. However, when you sum it, you take the actual value in each row in the 13,000 rows, and you add them all together. Does this make sense? Allow me to
Is it bad
illustrate.
when I say no?
Yeah, that's okay. That's why we're here, my
It's
friend.
kind of like, so if I have.
So here's my
30
data. Remember when we exported the data?
Go ahead.
So if I mark 2 rows, the sum would be 7, right?
Ah. I don't know what game ID actually means. I think that's the issue.
Game ID, it's like a numeric representation for a game name. For example, this is chess, and this is Tetris.
Whoa, wait. Those are strings, but 4 and 3 are not strings.
Yes, it's just a numeric representation. You don't really know what game ID 4 stands for.
Okay.
Usually, there's another table that has game ID and game name that would tell you, listen, game ID 4 is chess. Game ID 3 is, give me a name of a game.
Solitaire.
Solitaire.
Yeah, now I
Okay.
see what you're saying. Yeah, this is just the ID number
This is-
for a
yeah.
name.
Yes, this is game name. So once you have this table, you can join it over here, but let's not talk about joining it just yet. Let's try to
Right.
figure out aggregations. If you remember, this is the second type, the simple one we already covered. And the aggregations, for example, an average grade on a grades table. So let's talk about average. Maybe this one will be clearer. So we have the original data. So the interesting part would be the score. Because if you can notice in the data, since it's a synthetic data set, so there's lots of repetition in the game ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 0. But the score is more interesting. So if you would like to know what would be the average score on this entire data set, what would you have in mind? How would you write this? Would you like this one as an example? Like you
We
with me?
select a particular row
please.
and average of that.
Average on what? I need to specify a column. I cannot average
The
everything.
score, average for the score column.
Yep, right you are. Let's remove the limit. Just irrelevant at this point. What would you expect would happen? You get an average number of the scores. If this was a grade for a test like in school, that the grade is from a 0 to 100, that would be a complete failure, assuming 60 and above is passing the rate. Does this make sense, Amy?
Yeah, of course.
Mike, thank you. Okay. So we know lots of things by now. We know the average, we know the amount of rows. How about we ask how many user IDs? What do you think? Does it make sense? Is that a reasonable business question?
So we'll select the table and then we'll type count of user ID row.
What will happen if you count a column? What would it essentially count? I mentioned it before.
The number of columns.
The number of rows.
Okay.
The number of rows we already know. It's going to be 13,150. So let's run it. Let's see what happens. As we suspected, 13,000. So let's be a little bit more specific. If we want to count specific user ID, I'm gonna tell you the answer. You have to add the word distinct user ID. So how about we count a distinct user ID? So when we run this, the answer would be, drum roll, 792. Does it make sense, guys?
Yes.
Let's confirm that by going back to the Excel. Go back to the original data. On the user ID, change the function here to count. Oh, there's no count distinct. Anyone know how to do count distinct in Excel?
On Excel, when you, I think it's yeah, you got it. No, that's where, like the sum sign at the end, right? The sum, the first one, or the average, or the count. And then you say the number 2, C2. What's that noise? And then you, yes. Okay, you take C2 and then you have to scroll down at the very end and see what is the last line.
1 second, okay. So we got a sum, but we didn't get the count distinct. Okay, let's keep that for now. No worries.
Okay.
So just take my word, when you do count on the distinct value of user ID, you'll get the actual distinct values of user IDs. Okay?
Maybe you could try it on game ID and then you should get 5, 0 to 4.
Yeah. What do you expect if we do it on game ID?
I guess 5.
Okay, let's see. Yay!
You mean to
Very
say it will eradicate the duplicate values and give us the actual count?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Amy?
You mean to say it will remove the duplicate values and give us the actual number?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Let's start by doing something else. Let's do this query in another different way. I want to know all the game IDs, but without repetition. If I just keep if I ask for game ID, what will happen? I will get 13,000 rows with all the game IDs, but you see these repetitions? Say yes. Move your head,
Yes,
something.
yes. What you
Yes.
want is really just those 4 examples. Instead of repetition, you just want to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Which is 5 examples, right?
Yeah, of course.
So here's the group by part of SQL. After you select a column name from a table, you can tell them, listen, you can tell the query language, listen, after you get the results, group them by a specific column. For example, game ID. This means every time you see the same value again, just remove the line. So if you see 1 twice, just show it to me once. So what would you expect will happen now? Let's think together. If I have 1, 0, 4, 3, 2, nothing is repeating here, and then we get that 1 again. So this will be removed. 0 again, it will be removed. 4 again, it will be removed. 3 again, 2 again, and so on and so forth. Lots of repetitions all the way, and we already know how many game IDs do we have, right? So what should we expect the end result of the query? Come on, guys.
5.
It will group 5 rows.
5 rows, exactly. 5 rows containing the distinct value of game IDs, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Does this make sense, guys?
Yes, it
Can we
does.
count how many are there in each group?
Oh, that is the next question I'm going to ask. But let's wait for other people to catch up, and then we'll do that. How's that? Okay, iPad, you were asking something? Anyone else has questions before I proceed? Because I will really want you to understand this part. So now someone asked, I want to know for each game ID, how many rows I have. So how would you do that? Anyone has an idea? Anyone wants to guess? So allow me to share with you. Yes, anyone?
I think we can just select game ID from and group by. Okay, I can put select what we say, the unique ID for each person, and then group by game ID.
What will happen if we do that? Let's try to do
In that case,
that.
we can get the number of users for each game ID.
Let's try that. First of all, notice the amount of rows you got, 3,965. Essentially, what you ask is for each permutation of user ID, game ID, for example, 707 and 4, group the data. So every time we'll see a 707 and a game ID 4, shrink those to 1 row. So now you see all the different combinations of game IDs and user IDs, which is a lot more than what you thought. Which this means you were in the right direction, but the question was to ask about how many users played in each game ID. So as count user ID. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that was going to be my next approach.
Good one. So what you see here, 5 game IDs, each one has the same amount of user IDs, meaning, no, this is wrong. Even I made a mistake. You know what this number represents? The amount of rows, meaning all the games all the user IDs played. If we want to know how many users, we need to add this one. Now, what do you expect the number would be here?
It will be much lesser than this.
Lesser. And what would be the number? You remember how many users we have?
Somewhere, no, I mean, each one will have different, right? Because we have total around 13,000 users.
793 user IDs, because
right,
I
right,
created
right.
the data. I can tell you that
Yes,
everybody
yes.
played all the games. Okay, it's a synthetic data set. It's not a real data set. I created it for the sake of practice. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
good. So, any other questions we would like to ask about this data set? Anything interesting you would like to know about this?
I guess in like a real world situation, would you want to know which user played the most games? I know you mentioned just now that this was a synthetic data set, so it
Yes.
might be consistent, like your hottest users, and then conversely your cold users that you would maybe want more engagement out of.
So let's do that. Let's ask how many rows we have per user ID. Let's see. What do you expect the answer would be? Give or take. Give me a number.
Well, if this is synthetic, is each user playing each game once?
Yes, I think so.
So then in that case, it would be 5.
No, but it didn't account for dates.
Oh, yeah.
Once per day. So let's run it. Let's see. Each user played 17 times across the time.
I see. Okay.
One
Moreover,
second, you were saying, one second. That doesn't make any sense. If you have 1,000 users and each of them plays 17 times, that would be not a coincidence, that would be a miracle.
how many users do I have? 793. Each of them, they performed 17. Let's test this. Select. This is how you can test yourself. 793 times. How many? What was the number?
I forgot.
You were too excited. 17.
Yeah.
What do you expect the answer would be?
1,305.
1,500.
15,000.
Oh,
Oh,
17. Okay, 15. Yeah, 14. Yeah.
yeah. What happened here? We lost a couple of games. What is the original number? You remember?
It was higher.
Remember this one?
Yes.
So what happened between 3,150 to 3,481? First of all, is it more or less? Which one is bigger?
The one.
this is more.
Of course. It's like 300, over 300.
So essentially, we have some sort of a problem. Why is
Is
that?
it some type of duplicate?
Yes, let's see what happened. So let's take, in order to test it, let's take all the data. Only, well, user ID is 707. Let's see what happens though. Let's explore the data. If you're not sure, you can always explore. So essentially I'm saying, give me all the data on one user so I can understand what's going on, right? Are you with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. So what do we get? We get 17 lines. User 707 across the board. Yes. Then game ID 0 to 4. Yes. Score is from 0 all the way to 90, give or take. Yes. Different dates. So what happened? So I'm not sure. Let's see. What was the history? Do I have a history here? Supposed to have history. What happened to my history? Dum dum dum.
Is it possible they didn't count the zeros?
Yeah, I believe you're correct. So let's see. What was the question we were trying to understand? Per user? How many games, right?
No, there you can see there's one-time score 0, and you can see the game ID 0 as well.
So let's see. We're trying to ascertain per user ID how many games. So we're expecting 17, right? Let's see. So we have 17. So if we have a problem, let's see how many distinct user IDs do we have? 793. Now what happened here? Do we have a 0 ID? Something like that. Let's order the numbers. Order by user ID. Do you want it descending or ascending? Anyone?
Descending.
Descending would helpful.
Descending. So let's do descending. So we have 792. Ooh, all the way. Going down, all the old fashioned, all the way to 0. And we have 793 users and 793 times 17 is 13,481. Let's do minus 3, 150. Let's see what we are missing in the math. 331. Does it divide by 17? Nope.
No.
So this is very interesting enigma. Something, if I was a betting man, it was something about
Can we go back to one person and then maybe find this one issue? Because if you look at many,
yeah. So let's
then I'll simplify it.
Yep. So how many games per user do we have? 17. So let's do that per user ID. Let's mark this out. Group by user ID. you have 700, 793. Let's do the average on this one. No, wait. Here's your answer. Do you understand? Some people didn't play 17 times. Isn't data interesting, my friends? So this was a real world scenario. Who asked this one?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
What does FO stand for?
It's just a different name when you don't have a name. If I just add CNT, I will give it a name. It was a different name when you don't have a name. As you see, change here to CNT.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I have a question as well.
Yes, please.
In line 2, you have written count and the brackets, there's a star. So the star here, does it mean that even the 0 is included in the count?
Yes.
Okay.
Does it make sense? So this is games count. Are you ready for the next complicated one, next level?
Sure.
So this is a table where we ran a query on top of it. But here's the beauty about SQL. You can treat the result of this query as another table. And let's ask the following question. How many users played 17 times? And how many 16? And is there a number? Is this interesting for you, Mike?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
Because
So
if you do QA, then you want to make sure that your data is valid.
Yes. So I do the following syntax. I call with syntax, and I give the table a name, raw data, as. Notice I put the entire query in brackets. So the results, this one, is inserted to a new table in runtime called raw data. And now I can do select star from raw data. This will give me the same results. I didn't change anything on the new table. But now I'll notice that the game CNT, I can group it by.
1 second. Where do I see the new name of the new table?
Here.
Oh, only there. That's what I'm saying.
Only here. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It doesn't really exist. It's been created on the fly.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now we take game counts and we want to ask how many users from each game count. And we need to group by the results again. So this is essentially a query on top of a query with the same structure, mind you, only the parentheses and the width. And the group by would be, who wants to help me on this one?
Games count.
Yes. So what do we expect to get? For each game count 17, how many user IDs, correct? Boom, let's run it. Ooh. So essentially, 462 users had 17 games, and 331 users had 16 games. Was this fun? Was this clear?
Not really. So you created another table so that it can show us the different counts of game played, pretty much.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it clearer now? Should I try
Another
to explain
question, do
again?
you, if you want to have that number, do you really have to create a virtual table? Is that, or is that a little bit complicated to make it complicated?
There are many ways to get to the same result.
Okay.
However, I wanted to show you the beauty of SQL language.
Gotcha.
Essentially, each query creates a new table for which you can run on top of it another query, and on top of it another query, and so on and so forth.
So
For example, sorry?
I wanted to ask, when, in what instances do you usually create a new table like that?
Oh, this is a matter of architecture and a use case where you have a business question and several data sets, and you need to combine them together into one data set. So you need to create a new table, and then there's a question of frequency. How many times do you want to do it? Every hour, once a day, once a month? So let's put, it's a good question, but let's put it aside. For now, let's focus on the technical.
Can I offer
yes,
another answer? Can I offer another answer?
please.
So the basic idea is that you learn a language to make a translation. So if I would be like from one country A and have a question, and then somebody from country B would listen to country A and then translate it. So when a business person comes to you while they are talking, you are thinking SQL language.
Yes.
It's not just really, oh, I have this one script for this one business situation. That would be a little bit inflexible, because as soon as something is off, your script doesn't work. So the reason why you try to make the script or the SQL maybe a little bit more flexible, a little bit more complicated, so you can see whenever somebody throws a business problem at you, you can actually translate it into SQL language.
Yes. Exactly. Allow me to complicate it a little bit, and let's wrap it up. Wrap this lesson with this one. Let's make sure I got the total amount of users correct. How would you suggest to do it? Just to a little bit complicated. Anyone has an idea? I want to sum these numbers to see if I get the total number of users I'm expecting. Anyone? So allow me. So this is aggregated data as parentheses. Let's do it here. And now let's run select star from aggregate data. Let's see, we get what we expect. Same thing. And now just run sum on in counts. Nope, same to users. Sorry, my bad. What do you expect? Do you remember the number, guys?
13,150.
793 users, guys. Now we know the amount of users is what we expected. So we know our query is correct. And we now know what we missed earlier. Any questions before we conclude, guys? Ooh, lots of chat. You missed that. So if you get, if you RSVP'd yes to this event, you will get a link in 5 days, 5 to 7 days, via WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, Meetup platform. If not, contact me. Also, you can join our WhatsApp international WhatsApp group. If you want it, just contact me via LinkedIn. Here's my full name, or via Meetup. Send me a message, and I will gladly send the link. I just don't want to put it the link of the chat group for public eyes because there's lots of spammers. Okay, any questions before we conclude, guys?
Yes, can you show your email address so we can contact you?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Stay tuned for our next events. We have lots of events coming. I'm going to lecture. Some other people are going to lecture. You can see that this community is quite growing, and it's on many countries. It's about 16 countries. So the next session would be not by me, it's by Aloxio. They're going to talk about the complex and advanced big data use case. The next session would be by me, BigQuery Demystified. We're going to use BigQuery again, talk a little bit about that, the specific features, and how you can start playing yourself with this one. And I will even share with you the slides and the video and some queries if you like to get started. But the idea is after this session, you should be able to play with SQL on your own. Okay, guys, I want to thank you all for your time and bid you all farewell.